We are surrounded, inundated, unhaunted by the highlight reel. Our digital windows open onto a world populated exclusively by the extraordinary. The optimized life, the curated self, the perfectly filtered moment. We are told, through 1,000 subtle and overt messages a day, that an ordinary life is a life wasted. The goal is not to be good, but to be the best. Not to be content, but to be constantly growing, grinding, hacking, and optimizing our way to an ever-receding horizon of perfection. The language of our culture has become the language of the superlative. We seek the most efficient workout, the most productive morning routine, the most Instagrammable vacation. We have become a culture of maximizers, convinced that happiness lies on the other side of an extraordinary achievement, a life that can be held up as a shining example. But what if this entire paradigm is a trap? What if the relentless pursuit of exceptional is the very thing architecting our anxiety and ensuring our misery? What if the most radical, liberating, and wisest choice you could make is to consciously, deliberately embrace a life of being average? This is not a statement of defeat. It is a declaration of freedom. Today, we are not going to offer you a new way to optimize your life. We are going to make the case for dismantling the machine of optimization itself. We will explore the psychological freedom of good enough and uncover why the quiet dignity of an ordinary life may be the greatest and most exceptional prize of all. To understand why this pursuit is so seductive and so profoundly damaging, we must first understand the psychological machinery it exploits. Our obsession with being exceptional is not a new human desire, but the conditions of the modern world have supercharged it into an engine of mass dissatisfaction. It runs on two powerful, and now dangerously intertwined, psychological fuels. The first is a fundamental aspect of human nature, a kind of primal social software hardwired into our brains. It was identified by the social psychologist Leon Festinger back in the 1950s in his groundbreaking social comparison theory. Festinger's theory states that we have an innate, unavoidable drive to evaluate ourselves, our abilities, our opinions, our status, by comparing them to those of others. This is not a moral failing, it is a basic, and often useful, human tendency. For most of human history, this was a localized, reality-based feedback loop. In a small community, you might compare your farming skills to your neighbors to learn and improve. You might compare your social standing to that of a few dozen people you knew intimately. The comparison group was small, and the feedback was grounded in reality. But today, we are no longer comparing ourselves to our neighbors. We are comparing ourselves to the entire world. And not the real world, but a funhouse mirror version of it. A meticulously curated and algorithmically optimized highlight reel broadcast directly into our pockets. Through the portals of social media, we are comparing our chaotic, messy, behind-the-scenes reality, our doubts, our laundry piles, our moments of boredom, our private failures, with the perfectly edited, publicly celebrated peak moments of 7 billion other people. We are comparing our average Tuesday with someone else's once-in-a-lifetime vacation. We are comparing our clumsy first draft with their polished final product. This creates a pervasive, constant, and entirely false sense of inadequacy. We look at our own lives, with their inevitable struggles and mundane rhythms, and conclude that we are uniquely failing. This constant, global, upward social comparison is the first powerful gear in the modern machine of misery. The second fuel is a concept known as the hedonic treadmill, or hedonic adaptation. This is the well-documented psychological phenomenon that humans have a remarkable ability to adapt to new circumstances, both good and bad. When something wonderful happens, we get a major promotion, we fall in love, we buy our dream house, there is an initial, undeniable spike in happiness and life satisfaction. But very quickly, often in a matter of months, we adapt. That new, wonderful reality becomes our new baseline, our new normal. The thrill fades. And to get another spike of happiness, we need a new, bigger, more exceptional achievement. The hedonic treadmill ensures that the finish line of happiness is always moving. The person who dreams of making 6 figures is ecstatic for a while when they achieve it, but soon their reference point shifts, their lifestyle inflates, and their eyes are on making 7. The author who dreams of simply being published is overjoyed until their new goal becomes hitting the bestseller list and then being critically acclaimed. The pursuit of exceptionalism is, by its very nature, an endless race on a treadmill that is designed to keep you running, forever chasing a feeling that is, by biological and psychological definition, temporary. Now, combine these two forces. The social comparison engine creates a feeling of I am not enough. The hedonic treadmill ensures that even when we achieve something to quell that feeling, we are running ourselves to exhaustion, chasing a mirage in a desert of our own creation. This relentless drive for the exceptional comes at a staggering, though often invisible, cost. It doesn't just make us unhappy in a vague, existential way, it fundamentally alters the way we think, decide, and experience our lives for the worse, erecting invisible barriers to contentment. First, it creates a state of decision paralysis. The psychologist and author Barry Schwartz, in his seminal work The Paradox of Choice, identifies 2 fundamental types of decision makers, maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers are those who feel compelled to make the absolute best possible choice in every situation. They must exhaust every option before making a decision. They will spend hours scrolling through reviews for every single television model before buying one. They will agonize over every item on a restaurant menu, terrified of missing out on the optimal meal. Their goal is perfection. Satisficers, on the other hand, operate differently. They have a set of internal criteria, a threshold of what is good enough. They will research a few options, and as soon as they find one that meets their criteria, they make a choice and, crucially, they move on. Their goal is not perfection, it is satisfaction. Our culture of exceptionalism is a factory for producing maximizers. We are taught from a young age that good enough is a synonym for failure. The result? We become paralyzed by choice. The pressure to choose that perfect career, that perfect partner, that perfect city to live in, or the perfect life path is so immense that we often end up choosing nothing at all, stuck in a state of anxious indecision, which Schwartz calls the tyranny of choice. As his research conclusively shows, even when maximizers do make a choice, they are consistently less satisfied with it than satisficers. They are haunted by the infinite number of alternative choices they could have made, forever wondering if a better option was just around the corner. Second, the pursuit of exceptionalism is the enemy of serendipity and simple joy. When every moment of your day must be optimized for productivity, growth, or a peak experience, there is no room left for the unplanned, the spontaneous, the beautifully ordinary. There is no time to simply sit on a park bench and watch the world go by, because it isn't productive. There is no space for a long, meandering conversation that has no agenda, or for reading a book simply for the pleasure of the story, not for its self-improvement takeaways. The writer Oliver Burkeman, in his profoundly important book 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, talks about the danger of instrumentalizing our time. We increasingly treat every moment as a resource to be used for some future goal. We even instrumentalize our leisure, turning hobbies into side hustles, relaxation into recovery optimization, and friendships into networking. In doing so, we rob our lives of the very texture, spontaneity, and presence that make them worth living in the first place. We sacrifice the joy of the present moment at the altar of an idealized, exceptional future that may never arrive. Finally, and perhaps most insidiously, tying our self-work, being exceptional creates an incredibly fragile identity. If your sense of who you are is based on being above average, smarter, more successful, more attractive, more disciplined, then your self-esteem is in a constant state of peril. It is contingent on external validation and a favorable comparison to others. Every failure, every setback, every time you encounter someone who is better than you at something, it is no longer just a data point, it is a direct and devastating threat to your core identity. As the philosopher Alain de Botton notes in his work Status Anxiety, our sense of self becomes a leaky balloon, constantly requiring the helium of external praise to stay afloat. This leads to a deep-seated fear of failure, a reluctance to be a beginner at anything, and a constant, low-grade anxiety that one day you will be found out as being, well, just average. A much more resilient and robust form of self-worth is one that is not contingent on external validation or comparison, but on internal qualities like curiosity, integrity, effort, and resilience. So what is the alternative? If the pursuit of exceptionalism is a psychological trap, how do we disarm it? The answer lies not in another form of optimization, but in a radical re-evaluation of our goals. The solution is to make a conscious, deliberate case for being average. This does not mean embracing mediocrity, laziness, or apathy. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of the concept. To consciously choose the path of the good enough is not an act of surrender, it is an act of profound wisdom and rebellion against a culture that profits from our dissatisfaction. It is about strategically redirecting your most precious resources, your time, your energy, and your attention toward things that actually contribute to a life well lived. The first step is to learn to become a Satisficer. As Barry Schwartz argues, this is the master skill for navigating the overwhelming choices of the modern world. It is the practice of setting your own internal standards and being content when they are met. You decide what a good enough sujoke, a good enough workout, a good enough creative project, or a good enough evening looks like, independent of the highlight reels you see online. This act frees you from the endless, exhausting loop of comparison and optimization. It trades the gnawing anxiety of, "Is this the absolute best?" for the calm contentment of, "This is enough." The second step is to rediscover the profundity of the ordinary. The great philosophical and spiritual traditions of the world have been teaching this for millennia. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, taught the value of focusing on the present moment and finding virtue and meaning in simple, everyday actions. Zen Buddhism finds the potential for enlightenment in the mindful act of drinking a cup of tea or washing a bowl. The beauty of a genuine conversation with a loved one, the simple pleasure of a walk in nature without a podcast in your ears, the satisfaction of a job done reasonably well. These are not the filler between the important moments of life. These are the moments of life. An exceptional life is not made up of a few, rare, exceptional moments. It is made up of thousands of ordinary moments lived with presence, attention, and appreciation. Finally, we must shift our focus from comparison to contribution and growth. The question that drives the exception list is, how do I measure up to others? The question that drives a more contented person is, how can I be useful, or how can I improve upon myself, just a little, from where I was yesterday? This shift, inspired by thinkers like the psychologist Carol Dweck and her work on the growth mindset, moves the locus of our motivation from the unstable external world to our stable internal world. Instead of trying to be better than others, a goal which is entirely dependent on who you happen to be standing next to, the goal becomes being better for others and for your future self. Progress is measured not against an impossible, ever-shifting external benchmark, but against your own past self. This is a game you can actually win. It fosters a sense of agency and competence rather than a sense of anxiety and inadequacy. The case for being average is not a case for a smaller life. It is a case for a deeper one. It is about the conscious decision to trade the exhausting, fragile pursuit of external validation for the calm, resilient freedom of internal contentment. It is the radical realization that you are not required to have a perfectly optimized morning routine, to monetize your every hobby, or to broadcast a curated version of your life to the world for validation. You are allowed to have a normal job that pays the bills and that you don't have to be passionate about every single day. You are allowed to live in a normal house, to have quiet, UN-photographed moments of simple, ordinary joy. You are allowed to be a work in progress. To embrace the good enough is to reclaim your life from the tyranny of the highlight reel. It is to find the quiet dignity in the middle of the bell curve, a place where you are free to define success on your own terms, based on your own values. It is the understanding that a truly exceptional life is not one that looks good on the outside to an audience of strangers, but one that feels good on the inside. And often, what feels good is not the frantic, breathless climb to the peak, but the peaceful, meaningful, and beautifully ordinary journey along the path.